As the host of Neutralize the Mama Trauma podcast, I am delighted to be able to bring you this podcast. My name is Wendy Lopez, and I would like to introduce myself to you. I specialize in helping people overcome their emotional blocks through different techniques, through emotional empowerment coaching and compassionate healing light facilitation. As a mom who has experienced narcissistic trauma, I help moms eradicate self-doubt in order to regain self-confidence to elevate their status both at home and at work. In our podcast, we discuss people's struggles, triumphs, and failures. We dive deeper into self-love, self-compassion, self-acceptance, and mindful, holistic tips. In every episode, I hope that you can take a golden nugget of advice and apply it to the journey of motherhood in order to raise your level of awareness. Welcome to Neutralize the Mama Trauma podcast, where you find healing and creative mental thought advice from experts on past pain, narcissistic experience, and trauma. Today, I have a special guest named Sabrina Rice. Sabrina Rice is a soul alignment coach, wife, mom of 2 daughters, and a seeker of truth and knowledge. Her credentials flow over anywhere from personal trainer to holistic nutritionist to Reiki master, hypnotherapist, and everything in between. So as you can tell, she is a truth seeker. So today she's going to speak to us on topics on teenage trauma and raising kids and evolving and her personal story. So we'll start off with your personal story, Sabrina. Welcome. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here and to share my story and a little bit about me and hopefully to, inspire other people in their lives as well to whatever they want to do.
Exactly. We all have free will and free choice, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Everyone gets to choose, in this life experience what they really want. Whether we see that way or not is an entirely different story. But hopefully those who are listening do understand that.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
But
beautiful.
yeah. But thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So how did you, we were speaking earlier before jumping on the podcast. And one of the things I wanted you to talk about is what you mentioned about you having the experience of alcohol abuse, even, ending your life. Can you tell us what was going on in that period of your life?
Absolutely. So, I grew up in a home where both of my parents were alcoholics. They had a problem. And it was the vibe of the house, if I may use that word. It was, you never knew what the day was going to be like. I'd come home from school. You never knew what you were walking into. My dad was disabled when I was little, so he didn't work. My mom was the main provider for the family. So mom was never there. Dad was there, but dad was pretty much drinking before lunch, right? Even on weekends and stuff. And just mom would get home and then they would start drinking together. And so it was a very volatile situation, right? It was always up and down and left and right. And so safety, I never felt safe. I never felt stable, right? And those things always came out later in my life to heal. But at that moment, that's the vibe, that's the environment in which I was raised, right? And so living in that environment, it's very oppressive and again, you don't feel safe, you don't feel secure, you don't have your needs met so much, right?
Right.
I always felt like the parent in our relationship. I always felt like I was the mature, responsible one. And that was a very interesting situation to live through, right? And to be in. I understand now, of course, how it helped me to be who I am today. But in that moment, it just felt absurd, right? It just felt like I couldn't breathe, right? And so obviously living in that environment for such a long time, I just started to get just fed up and sick and tired of having to deal with it all the time. I couldn't see a way out. I came from the house, the area time, the perspective for my parents were like, we don't say anything. We don't talk about the elephant in the room. We hide, we stuff, right? Just pretend it doesn't exist. And after a while, like I said, it was just like, it was too much for me. I just couldn't see a way out. I couldn't escape. And I tried to take my life. Thank God that didn't happen, because I feel like now, like, if that would have happened, right, like the world would be missing out.
Right. And how old were you there, Sabrina, when that happened?
So I was 17. I was in high school,
Mm,
right in the middle of it, and not in high school. I was from a very small town. I lived in a very, very, very small area, right? So not a big population at all. My high school was very small, and it was typical, right? It had all of the groups of people that we
mm-hmm,
could think of that are in there, and I made myself be the out person, right? The outlier. I didn't participate. I didn't want to participate. I didn't want to be in the spotlight. I didn't want to draw attention to my family life or any of
mm-hmm,
that, or myself, right? Because it was just too much. But I was lucky, though, to have at least one best friend and her house where I could escape to. So I could at least
okay.
regain some sanity for a moment. And I would always try, if I could, just to like stay over at everyone's house, because it
Mm-hmm,
just it just made me forget for a time until I
mm,
had to go back, right? But I saw got therapy after that. We
mm-hmm,
tried to do family counseling. My parents still refused to drink. They still hid it, which pissed me off anymore, even more.
mm-hmm,
It was creating such rage in me, right? The
mm-hmm,
hypocrisy. I could
mm-hmm,
not stand this injustice that was happening, where one thing was said and another was happening. It was infuriating. Um,
mm-hmm,
but but lucky with friends, family, counseling, I was able to hold on. And of course, as soon as I graduated high school, I was out of there.
mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
that's been a saving grace for me. That was a saving grace for me.
Wow. So at what age did this all start that you recollect?
Like, it started, I say, just built up over periods of time. Honestly, I don't
Mm-hmm,
feel like there's one catalyst that which does it, right?
mm-hmm,
It's a build up of being in the environment, thinking certain thoughts, right? Perhaps influence from outside, society and media, that kind of thing. Today it's way worse, mind you, than what it
mm-hmm.
was when I was in high school. But yeah, it was a buildup, probably from, gosh, I'm trying to think back here on the fly, but
Yeah,
definitely,
since so
yeah,
basically, like when
yeah,
you
I started,
you were aware that they had a drinking problem, that was happening.
and I knew that they had a drinking problem for a very early age. This was just part of my life, part of where I lived. People, all, because I lived in a small town, everybody knew my parents and everybody
Oh,
identified. I mean, when I talk small, I'm talking like under 70 people. Small,
oh, wow.
small. Like
Okay, wow.
everyone's business, right? And
Mm-hmm,
you could not escape the the labeling, right? You
mm-hmm,
could not
mm-hmm.
escape it. And I just think over time that gets to you. It wears on you, and you don't know what
Right.
to do. You see no way out. No one's there to help you. We didn't have a big family. I'm an only child.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the family was isolated because of the drinking problem. So it really felt like I was an island.
Right, right. And so, what were
Yeah.
you, like 4 years old, 5 years old, when you had awareness of their parents having a drinking issue?
Yeah, I would definitely say seven. Seven's kind of that pivotal time for
Mm,
where it became, you know, understanding a little bit deeper, and acceptance perhaps of this is my environment. This is the way
mm-hmm,
it is, right?
mm-hmm,
This is the terrain that I have to navigate.
mm-hmm,
My parents are volatile, right? I got to be a great people pleaser
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
from the experience, right? Um,
Right, right.
which to heal obviously later in my life, and
Wow.
still working on it too, mind you. It's always a work in progress, but
That's
yeah,
right.
from a young age. And I had some counseling here and there, because I did deal with some some other abuse there, some sexual abuse when I was there that I had to go throughout. And it just, it just kept leading and spiraling, and no one really there to be a light or to pull me out. Right. It was just,
Right. Oh, and I have
yeah.
to say, first of all, I'm so glad that you said yes to being on the podcast, because this is what really the message is about, because you have such a vibrant soul, right?
Mm,
That if
yeah.
someone talked to you now and didn't know your
Yeah.
story, they would
Yeah.
not know the abuse that you went through,
Mhm.
the sexual abuse later on, and then being in your 17 years old and then wanting to end your life because
Yeah.
of the trauma that, I just want to let the moms know that, because when I work with my clients is,
Mm,
we don't choose our trauma. And so we have
mm-hmm.
no control of the environment that we're in.
Mm-hmm.
That's where
Yeah.
we spiral out, because we're
Yeah.
not living what our insides. It's not that someone has told us that the environment
Right.
is healthy. It's our inside tells us that
Mhm.
this is not, doesn't feel good.
Absolutely. It doesn't feel right. There's something wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Even though my parental people, right? My parents are telling
Mm-hmm.
me that it's okay, right? It's fine, but innately okay, something's off.
Mm-hmm.
Something's wrong. My life didn't look like my friends' lives. They
Mm-hmm.
they didn't necessarily relate to how I felt, right? Like there was a gap. So I always felt different, right? I always felt
Mm-hmm.
like I didn't belong. And I think it serves me completely, and it had served me later in life, obviously. But at that time, it felt like every other teen now, right? Or every other child now. They don't want to feel left out from the pack, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
that would ensure survival back in the day. So it's
Right.
that human part of us, that human nature that wants to belong, wants to feel a part. But I never did. And I was excluded because of my
Mm-hmm.
physical reality of my parents and everything like that, but also emotionally
Mm-hmm.
detached, because I didn't want my friends to know or to see how dysfunctional my family was. And I never wanted my school life and my parents' life to meet at all. I tried my
Mm-hmm.
damnedest to keep it separate, even though we
Mm-hmm.
had school plays and stuff like that, because I knew they would show up drinking or had a drink. And
Oh.
then people would know, and then how would that look on me? Because again, growing up in a small town where everybody chats and talks
Mm-hmm.
about you don't want to feel that, right? Again, that separation, that island,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like
Right.
that, people don't realize, how detrimental that can be.
Right. Now that you are a mother and you have your own teenage children, can you talk to us about what traumas as a mom you can go through with your teenage children?
So I have a 10 and I have a 13, almost 14-year-old,
Mhm.
both daughters. And sorry, the question again, because I didn't.
Yeah, so it's more like you sharing, since you're a mom of a teenager now, what traumas do you feel that a parent can feel as a trauma?
Can heal as a trauma?
A feel like what
Feel.
what can come, yeah, like what can they, because we sometimes we don't know it's a trauma when we have a teenager.
I see. So like something that
How
perhaps
is
you
it, yeah, how is it
now.
coming? Yeah.
I so I'm on top of obviously my kids are going to have their own human experience. This is the
Mm-hmm.
perspective they both came through me to have their human experience. And
Mm-hmm.
that's going to look very different from mine. I get to, from my perspective, heal and have healed that generational trauma from
Mm-hmm.
mine. So they don't have to take that shit on, but it doesn't mean they don't have their own. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm very aware of the environment they're in at all times. Like I
Mm-hmm.
am very aware of what interactions that they're getting, what they're exposing themselves to. You might call me paranoid about that,
Mm-hmm.
but because of my trauma, it has put me in this state of hyper awareness, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hypervigilance, where it's the point where my parents didn't take parenting seriously. I take it very serious.
Mm-hmm.
And So I'm even with so I was also had eating disorders. Like I struggled with those. And so from when I knew I had girls and was going into that, I was like, they're not struggling in that department like I did either. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've always guided them and led them out of the directions that perhaps could have led them to the same experience had I not had that awareness. You know, from, I mean, today, right? Like social media, like I'm always telling them, be aware of what is going into your subconscious mind from songs, from movies, TV, obviously social media, like everything, what you're hearing and talking about with your friends. Talking to them about, you know, our body, like making sure we're respecting our body and we're respecting it through how we dress, but also how we talk about it. You know, making sure that we're having the conversations about food as food being nourishing, as food helping your body, right? Not keeping it in the stance of it's either good or bad. It's just we want to nourish, right? So all the things we talk about mental health a whole lot, making sure, again, not only what I mentioned with the subconscious, but also being aware of how you're feeling and reaching for help and having these conversations. So I'll have conversations with my teen all the time, you know, about how she's feeling, like what she's thinking, how she's perceiving her peers, the world that she's in, because I want to know, because I want to help guide her through this level that she has to go through. And same thing with my 10, but the 13-year-old obviously is in a whole other perspective than my baby. But yeah, I mean, I'm always looking and searching. My mind just wants to filter through what potential dangers could be. And the biggest one that we have struggled with is definitely social media and allowing it to be used helpfully. Right. Like, I feel like at 13, going on 14, you know, we can't just give the whole world to them on a silver platter, right? We can't just give it all open to them and thinking that they know how to discern between right and wrong. Like you can tell them, but even though I've told them, she still has gotten herself into some situations that, you know, necessarily not so great choices. But again, that's her lesson to learn. Her choices are lessons to help guide her. And my parents weren't guiding me at all. I had like no guidance. I was guiding myself pretty much, right? She gets that benefit of having this guidance. And who knows, with her children, she might be like, my mom needed to back up. Like she was overly guiding me, right? And then she will take that on to her children and it'll change their trajectory, right? Whatnot. But yeah, that's how I see, view, and try to guide and try to keep aware of potential down the road traumas.
Right. And then as a parent, just dealing with a teenager can be traumatic, right? Because at that time, they are evolving to their own person.
Yes.
And there can be this conflict, there can be this push and pull. What would you advise moms that start entering that period? Because I think, because even for my experience, it's like, you know, it's great, you know, I have boys, so he's a teenager, but then it's like, I didn't have the awareness at that time of how to deal when their attitude starts with their responses, with their, you know, gestures, their facial expressions. What would you suggest for moms? Like how would they better cope or deal with that?
So from my perspective, you do have to pick your battles. You have to like with it. I come from so like my parents, they didn't like guide me in that sense, but they were punishers, right? You know, there were consequences. And so to stay inside the lines, right, and go unnoticed even further, right, because I didn't want that extra trauma, I kept my head down and just moved through. And so So with my kids, I have to have to do a lot of deep breathing when
Mm-hmm.
we get those attitudes, because my natural reaction is to want to get triggered, to want to get
Mm-hmm.
upset, right? And to want to like point fingers and say, you're not supposed to do this. This is not how you're supposed to behave, blah, 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 blah. But for me, I've had to, you grow so much as a parent. I feel
Mm-hmm.
like when you choose to become a parent, you are setting yourself up for such deep healing for your own
Right. Right.
own health, your own childhood too, right? Even what you might not have, but also just life experience and life evolvement, right?
Mm-hmm.
You never stop learning with children. And so with the attitudes though, I have learned you have to pick your battles and not every
Mm-hmm.
battle is a battle has to be won. That
Mm-hmm.
is what I am currently learning right now is to, it's not a right and wrong situation at a certain
Mm-hmm.
point, right? People might not agree with me on that, but from what I'm dealing with now and from my perspective of what I know, personally and professionally,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you have to let go and you have to be willing to
Mm.
let them learn, explore, become their own human being. Absolutely. But even in these small moments, we have to let them see without us pointing it out about their behavior, because as you have grown them and taught them, they already know this shit at that age.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They just need to embody it and implement it forward. And so
Mm-hmm.
we have to give them space to implement it. We have to give them space to have the opportunity to embody it, to show
Mm.
you, to prove to you that they were listening. They do know right from wrong. But my husband mentioned this to me the other day, and it really hit home. It's like, you can tell somebody all you want how to behave, but until they experience that for themselves, they're never really going to embody it or understand it, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
People all the time. I learned the hard way. Like it was a badge of honor, right? Like I
Mm-hmm.
choose, we don't have to, but sometimes in order to get the full understanding of the lesson, right? Even as adults, right? And from
Mm-hmm.
a perspective of God down,
Mm-hmm.
He has to let us go through lessons. And
Mm-hmm.
we have to learn how to implement, how to change, how to shift from that. They do too. It's the same
Mm.
thing
Yes.
on a different level. And so I think it does us a disservice as parents, as teens, when we're trying to control, right?
Mm.
Trying to get them to do the right thing. They already know,
Yeah.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
of course, that's going to keep going on as they get older and older. Obviously, I'm only up to age 13, almost 14, and
Mm-hmm.
my
Mm-hmm.
daughter this all the time. It's like, I'm a human being. I'm 42. I only know up to this level in life, and I also only know up to parenting level 13.5. Right? Like
Right.
that's all I know. And so
Right.
we're really just doing our best here together. We're in this
Right.
process trying to figure out how not to pretty much fuck you up, right?
Mm-hmm.
As
Mm-hmm.
parents,
You're
I
right.
feel like that so deeply, like, oh my God, I'm gonna totally fuck up this kid. But we do have to that, because that's not at all what's happening, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's happen. It's just lessons. It's just lessons.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing too like is here is really happening. But yeah, I could go on and on and on, but
Yes, I know.
that
I totally. I love what you said about, from God down. It's like we have, it's a perspective of, right, and letting us go through it and learn through it, because we have to do that, and then we have to give them that ability to go through it and learn from it if they choose not to follow your guidance, right? Because there's only so
yeah,
much, like your husband said, that you can do,
yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah. So, what would you advise on your perspective of, because I see this a lot and I feel like I want to bring this more to the forefront
Hmm.
in my podcast, when the children, because you mentioned Punisher,
Hmm.
and right, and here we're speaking about, shifting from trauma and
Yes.
learning from the trauma and being
Yeah.
empowered from it. But there's also trauma when parents and do this to the children, maybe unconsciously or consciously they're doing it. But when the child comes forthright and says the truth of what happened in a situation when they're being asked,
Mm-hmm.
And then they get punished for saying the truth.
Yes, yes, that's what I experienced personally, as a child, right? And
Mm-hmm.
my oldest daughter, God bless her, can call you out on all your shit. And again, we raised her this way. We raised her
Mm-hmm.
to be independent, to
Right.
be, this is what we did. But as from our perspective as parents and where we're at, with our thinking and how we
Yes.
do things,
Right.
when she pretty much mirrors back, right, to me or to us, something that we have said and something that perhaps we're not holding in that same, right, what we told, say, what is it, do as I say, not as I do
Mm-hmm.
type of mentality, right?
Right. Right.
That can be such a huge trigger, right? Because you're like, who are you? I'm the parent. You're not the parent. We get into this whole authoritative
Authority. Right. Right.
stance. We're like trying to manipulate. We're trying to
Yes.
pull. Right. I'm doing these like hand gestures, but we're like,
Yes.
trying to like squash that down. But I feel like we're there to raise them to do this. We're there to raise them to be bigger and better and greater than we are. And that's going to be their thinking, their thought processes, and the stuff that they mirror back. Us
Mm-hmm.
as parents, we can take that as, okay, so I am being triggered in this moment. Why am I being triggered in this moment? Because
Mm-hmm.
I'm not being authentic. I'm not holding up to, right, my morals, my standards that I'm teaching my kid. There's an imbalance there, right? And it's just showing you your work to do as a parent, as a human being, that
Mm-hmm.
more in the same moral compass that we're trying to teach our children, right? We can't, it doesn't work. They're going to show us that. We're not going to like
Yes.
it, but that's
Right.
okay, because that's
Right.
our work to do. That's our stuff to like clean up a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if we look at
Right.
it that, don't get triggered and shut down and try to like overpower our kids and get them punished and in trouble because they spoke back to us. Again, I always talk about tone. We talk a lot about tone in our house,
Mm-hmm.
because there's ways to say things that are respectful versus rude. But sometimes if the parent's not listening, and myself included, I'm not exempt, mind you,
Mm-hmm.
not listening, not hearing, sometimes when you raise your voice, that's how you get somebody's attention. If they're not
Mm-hmm.
listening, it snaps
Mm-hmm.
them of that trauma response too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we go into this anger trance, we go into this depression trance, we go into these, right, emotional trance.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And that snapping out of it would be the child being like, because you're like, whoa, what the hell just happened there, right? But
Mm-hmm.
that's your opportunity to pattern interrupt.
Mm-hmm.
That's your opportunity to, oh, you know what, be a human with your child.
Yes.
I'm a firm believer of
Right.
human with your child, and I don't think there's
Yes.
any level of disrespect there. I think it's just being authentic and transparent, because I
Yeah.
think if we can level with them and our kids can realize that, you
Mm-hmm.
know what, we're kind of in this together, we're
Mm-hmm.
co-creating together, we're learning together. It's a much better, greater environment to evolve from, as
Right.
everyone, right, humans,
Right.
children, everyone. It serves you greater, I feel.
Mm-hmm. It's so true because as you're speaking, I remember when I was small, I didn't realize I had a lot of wisdom.
Mm,
And it was that, like you said, that controlling, that, shutting down the child, like because
right.
it's seen as you're speaking back. And even though my tone was normal, but just the fact that I spoke back at that time, you're speaking back and that's it.
Mm,
But
mm,
now I feel like that needs to be more in the forefront of listening
yes.
instead of going into that, it's probably a
Mm,
trigger of what we
yeah.
experience, right? The authority, like I'm the parent, and then you're going to listen to me. But you said
Mm-hmm.
something so beautiful. We're here to actually co-create with our children,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And if we're co-creating with our children, wow, then we're going to help them not only feel seen, heard, and loved, but we're going to
Yeah.
feel seen, heard, and loved from our own children. And it's that
Absolute.
beautiful mirror, right? Instead of it being
Yeah.
like a contrast mirror.
Yes.
Yeah, but
Yes.
being that beautiful mirror where the children are learning and you're learning. And like you said, I loved it. you said that, it's coming on that human level.
Yes.
Because that's
Yes.
all we're doing. We're humaning.
Absolutely. And I find it softens it so much better, right? Because, and the kid's going to listen when it's softer, right? When you're softer, you're going to listen
Mm-hmm.
a lot more
Mm-hmm.
than when
Yeah.
you're in an trance, right? You cannot reason with anybody. And I say trance because I'm also a hypnotherapist. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
a lot of the times, right, when you're in hypnosis, you're pretty much just in a different
Right.
state of, right, an altered state, a trance-like state. Well,
Mm-hmm.
emotions are the same exact thing. It's just
Mm-hmm.
different. It's just things that aren't serving you. But
Mm-hmm.
you can definitely, catch more what is it, flies and honey or whatever the
Mm-hmm.
and that works for your children too. And I think like we've learned this from as our parents, the whole authority, oppression, like I'm the
Mm-hmm.
parent, this bigger covered
Mm-hmm.
kid, kind of like image. We've learned it from our parents. Our parents have learned it from their parents. It's been, in our society, in our world for quite some time. And we, though, as human souls and human beings here, we can totally interrupt that lineage,
Mm-hmm.
that pattern. We can
Mm-hmm.
stop that with us once we get that awareness. And also go down the road of, okay, why do I want to be so authoritative over the kid? Like, is that what I really
Mm.
want? What does
Yes,
that
right. That's a
like?
great question. Mm-hmm.
Do I really want, why? Where'd that come from? Because we don't ask those questions. We just observe and we continue patterns without knowing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And stop and ask ourselves that, like, what does that serve me? Most of the time, you're going to find with your teen, it's not serving you at all, which is why you're in conflict, right? So
Right.
much with teen, right? And teens
Right.
want love and they need to be guided. And I
Yes.
think a lot get so upset at our teen. We get so like frustrated with our teen and we think, oh my gosh, the teen's the problem, right? We don't necessarily think that we have a part in it. Perhaps it's just the teens
Mm-hmm.
not doing what they're being told and, blah, blah, blah. But the teen just needs our support. They just need our love. They need our guidance more than ever. They need that softening. They need to know everything's going to be okay.
Mm.
What they're experiencing is way different than what we experienced, right? And that goes to
Mm-hmm.
say for every generation, it's always going
Mm-hmm.
to look different. And I
Yes.
think we'll some compassion on our teens, especially when they react and
Mm.
that we necessarily wouldn't like them to.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
again, that's a lesson for both, right? It's always
Mm.
nothing's gone wrong.
Interesting.
Lessons are good. It helps. It just helps.
And I love that you said the word compassion, right? So if we can give them more
Yeah.
compassion, because if we can
Yeah.
think when we were teenagers,
Yeah.
we could have used a little bit of more compassionate ear, right?
Hell yeah.
A more compassionate energy, right? More
Yeah.
compassionate thoughts towards our, as a teenager, like what our needs are at that time. And that's
Yeah. Yeah.
that's the time, that teenage time is that's when they're starting to evolve, because
Yeah.
coming from like infancy to about 12, literally, they're
Mm-hmm.
really under you.
Yeah.
But when those, the system changes within themselves of the
Yeah.
teenager,
Yeah.
that's like their own, like they're coming into their own. And that's
Yeah.
when the parent feels that conflict. So if we
Yes.
understand that, like you said, we're humaning with them, if we could
Yep.
have compassion with them, and that brings
Yeah.
compassion to the parent as well for doing that, right?
Absolutely. And it's a good time to mirror what you've taught them or them to mirror what you've taught them. So if they're acting and behaving in certain ways, yes, of course, outside influence, but
Mm-hmm.
I think that the seeds of it all, the foundation of it all come from us and we get to see that
Mm-hmm.
action or that in motion. And if we're not seeing something that we don't like, we can always work with them
Mm-hmm.
on it again from a humaning perspective, from a
Mm-hmm.
compassionate standpoint. But the biggest part is to not get triggered. When we're
Right.
triggered, we can't see anything. We can't level. We can't come to a state of compassion, right? Because that's a lower frequency. It's a lower energy. We want to,
Mm-hmm.
move up into those higher frequencies, those higher love, compassion, right? Joy, all of those things, because then people can hear you, can receive from you a whole lot better, right? It's more
Mm-hmm.
expansive than contracted in terms of emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Right.
and just attract so much more from your teen and your other children. But anyway, I digress. I could go on point with that triggering because I see this in myself. I want to naturally, because I'm a human being, I want to get triggered, right? Something goes wrong, something happens with my teen, or like, I want to get triggered, but pattern interrupt, a couple deep
Yes.
breaths, get that parasympathetic state, woo, right? Get rest and digest, not fight or flight, and then start to see from a level head, right? A little bit more compassion. It's okay to be wrong. It's nothing's gone wrong with being necessarily perceived wrong. And it's not even wrong. It's just a lesson, right? It's what we know. We only do what we know. And what we don't know, don't know. And I think we just can't beat ourselves up as parents, especially as moms. I don't know dads because I'm not a dad, but definitely moms. We have to give ourselves compassion and love and support through this experience as well. Again, I think if you just come back to the humanism in all parties, it really does, right? It really makes it helpful.
Right. And I was going to have you touch on raising kids and evolving, but I think we touched that on giving them the space and you the space to evolve through the mirrors, right, of one another.
Yes, absolutely. And it depends on what your age is. I'm 42, and so I know we're that midlife going in, right? I don't even know when midlife is. I don't identify with midlife. I just
right.
As always being Sabrina, who is ageless.
Right.
Right. Allowing yourself to evolve and grow and not being stuck in your ways, right? No matter your age, no matter where you are in career, family, marriage, I don't know, whatever those societal constructs tell us, right? By this age we should be, or by that we should do this, right? All that hooey that doesn't serve us, right? It just keeps us in boxes, that holds us back. But if we can just allow ourselves to grow and evolve as well, and that be okay, and that not making it mean anything has gone wrong, it really helps us as a human, as a parent,
right?
Everything, right?
Right.
And yeah.
I love it. I love it. Yes. So we talked about evolving. When did you make the choice? What, either a situation happened, but when was it that you made the choice to evolve and search for deeper from what your reality was into getting into like either Reiki or something else to help you? Like, what made you make that decision to look for something else for help to evolve?
So for me, it's always being guided by what excites me, what lights me up, what interests me. Because I feel like our own intuition is guiding us to what we need to know when we need to know it.
Right.
And so if we can allow ourselves to go with what interests us, and working with those limiting beliefs, because you are going to have them always when you start something new, right? Because for me, I had a nutrition practice, holistic nutrition, also personal training. Now, so alignment coach. So recently there's just been that shift, but I've had to learn to let go of the boxes, the constructs, the designations, if you will, the titles, all that stuff. And just go with the fact that I have a soul, a human soul, and my soul, because I know more about myself. I've learned to have a relationship with myself in terms of just getting to know who I am at my core, right? Not this external Sabrina, right? Because who we see in this meat suit is not who I am, right? This is a representation of who I am outwardly in this world, but it's not who I am.
Right.
Who gets excited off of learning and growing and expanding, because what I do is I like to take all that goodness and help other people with it. I call myself like a walking, talking little cliff notes for those women who don't want to go out and aren't passionate and don't have that, seeker of truth, right? That's part of my soul. I have that in my bio. It's part of my soul's design.
Yes.
I get to digest all that information easily, where other women maybe not, but I get to still teach and help them to understand it and learn it and implement it in their life as a cliff note, right? Something that's a little easy. But I've just followed my intuition. I learned to do that. And how I learned to do that was through years of not loving where I was,
Mm-hmm.
struggling with who I was, like not accepting who I was, because I had to
Mm-hmm.
do some healing on all the levels of
Mm-hmm.
my surrounding my eating disorders, my worthiness, my not feeling
Mm-hmm.
like right, all of those wounds that came about from years of obviously trauma, living life as a woman in her 20s, right, trying in the world. I feel like we can't come into this to those periods of time not being unscathed, right? We're
Mm-hmm.
always gonna catch something, do something, right? Get involved in some part of it because it's everywhere. The programming
Mm-hmm.
is everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but when we can see that, you know what, I want more for my life. What I'm doing is okay, but it's not lighting me up. It's not making me passionate. I've always been that person who wants to do
Okay.
more life. I've always been that person who just gets
So
excited about helping other people. And
so
it's
you
just
made the choice. I'm sorry. So you made the
no,
choice. You made the choice then because you were seeking to be lit up,
yeah, seeking
right?
more, seeking a 9 to 5, the mundane of going, waking up, going to bed, even just when my kids were little, parenting. I was like, there's more for me than just parenting. Not that parenting is
Mm-hmm.
just, because parenting is not just,
Right.
right? It is so much more. But at that time, I couldn't wrap my head around it because I didn't have the higher perspective or knowledge to look upon it as that in that moment. All I knew is that I was not satisfied just existing, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And
Right. Right.
I did, my soul wanted, and my soul was calling me to more. And as I followed that, I came into that more.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I feel that's what's happening with moms, where they are not getting the more because it's
Yeah.
fitting into the constructs of what is
Yeah.
expected. And since it's not normal, we suppress that.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And that's where anxiety comes and depression comes.
Absolutely, 1000%, because we're told we're supposed to be happy when we have
Mm-hmm.
checked the boxes of career
Mm-hmm.
or not, children or not, right? But as moms, it's you have your children, right? What more could you want? You have a spouse who loves you, right? You have the career, you have the life, you have the house, you have the car, right? Whatever the boxes are that we're supposed to check off in life to make us successful or happy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And look at our life like, well, I have all the things, but why aren't I happy? Right? That's
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
the picture. And I'm like, because you're not following, you're not listening to your soul. Your soul's
Mm.
the
Yes.
unhappy and
Mm-hmm.
anxiety and nothing that's gone wrong. It's just we're not listening to that greater part of us. We're not listening to that internal.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're not listening to that internal guidance, right, the external world is not going to be what you want it to be. It's not going to be that more and the enough. We have to come inside. Inside is where
Yeah.
all is, right? That's where
Right. Right.
goodness in life comes from. And
Yeah.
I deeply understand that so much for so many women. And
Yes.
that's one of my greater messages. There's more waiting for you out there, right? You just got to
Yes.
go in.
Right. And it's beautiful. So I want the audience to see and see you as an example of how you went through, like you said, you moved out at 18, but prior to 18, you had such
Mm-hmm.
a challenging, traumatic childhood, per se.
Mm-hmm.
And to see you where you are at in your life now and how you help other women as well. This is how we use trauma to empower us instead of staying, but it all comes from a choice. That's
Yes.
where I want moms to know is like, you need to make that choice. It is uncomfortable, but that discomfort, like she said, breathe. I had another interview this morning. She said the same thing, breathe it out so you can take that next step, so you can follow, right, the nudge to take you and guiding you out because we're not here to stay stuck in that trauma.
No, we're
And
not.
even what I noticed too is people that have gone through the trauma, they've survived it, but they're still in that meandering of not
Mm.
knowing what to do next because they haven't quite realized where they're at. So this is why I love the podcast to bring that awareness to give you
Yes.
that push to be okay. Maybe I'm not okay where I am right now.
Absolutely. And like you said, the choice is so powerful. We don't talk enough about choice or low level like awareness, like that spark, because we don't know
Hmm.
what we don't know. And as soon as you
Yeah,
have it, you can't help but drastically change your whole life,
exactly.
right?
Exactly.
It
Exactly.
ripples. But
Yes.
it's like, do you want to live where you are? Do you want to stay where you are? Or do you want more? And I think we get stuck in those limiting beliefs of,
Hmm.
I can't, people like me don't, right? All those thoughts that we're told perhaps in our childhood, whatnot, right? Because I would get a lot of that from my parents. Oh, people like us don't have money, right? People like us aren't successful. People like us, right? Like all that crap.
Hmm.
But if you can just get to that decision part, that's a beautiful place to start.
Yes. Right.
So important. It's like
Right. Right. I love it. So, any last thoughts for the audience you want to tell moms that comes up for you that you want them that they can maybe practice something or something that they can just take with them
yes.
today?
Absolutely. First of all, I always want people to know they're not alone. They're never
Mm-hmm.
alone.
Mm-hmm.
Your podcast is an example of this, right? You can go
Mm-hmm.
on social media and type up a real response. You're going to see how not alone you are.
That's true.
And that's first and foremost, because when I was in my deep depression, I felt so alone. And we're in the
Mm-hmm.
day and age of social media, and
Mm-hmm.
you can all the people in the world that you're not alone with. And that is such a beautiful and powerful thing, right? Because that tends to then
Mm-hmm.
soften you to the idea and start talking it out and having a conversation. And through that, you're going to have change and growth, right? Even if
Mm-hmm.
it's any stranger on the other side of the planet, right?
Mm-hmm.
That you hold it in, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
so important to not get stuck in. But also, really, the biggest thing I think that you can do is really start to look at your triggers. Start to see when you feel that tightness in your chest, the
Mm-hmm.
constriction in your body, when you
Mm-hmm.
start to listen talking to your teen, right? Or your husband, right? Any
Mm-hmm.
person. But
Mm-hmm.
you're going to feel that most with your teen or your husband because you have, right? You
Right.
have real ties to them, real investment in them, right? But just start to notice that first step, and you always feel that emotional state first before you can realize. I mean, we know thoughts, feelings, actions, right? But
Mm-hmm.
that emotion, when your head is all over the place because our nervous systems are so out of whack, right? We can't even
Mm-hmm.
think straight. But take the time to notice when you feel that constriction, that
Mm-hmm.
beginning of the trigger. Because if you can catch that, you can see that, you can change the whole path and
Mm-hmm.
direction in which that conversation is going to go. And what direction
Mm.
it goes is going to, it's going to be a good direction or not so great direction. And
Mm-hmm.
which direction it goes, it's a learning experience. But I would love for people, and I would have loved that as
Mm-hmm.
a to know that, because it can start to shift everything. You can start to
Yes.
feel
Yes.
different about
That. Mm-hmm.
triggers, right? Triggers aren't anything that's going
Right.
for your good. They're
Yeah.
helping you grow. So if we can
Mm-hmm.
feel it, decide, so much
Mm-hmm.
better.
Yes,
Breathe. Oh, yeah.
absolutely.
Breathe, breathe,
Yes,
breathe,
breathe.
breathe. Right? Breathe. And you don't have to respond to your teen right away either. I do this with mine. Like if I'm
Mm-hmm.
feeling so triggered and I know emotionally, because perhaps I haven't worked on myself in that area, that I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to handle,
Mm-hmm.
take a deep breath and be like, you know what? Let's just interrupt here for a few minutes. I'll come back to you. I'm going to go have a human moment. Give me a second.
Mm-hmm. You know,
And
yeah, so true.
mean you're a shitty parent. It doesn't mean you're doing it wrong, right? It doesn't mean that they're going to not respect you. If anything, they'll respect you a whole lot more. But take a moment.
Mm-hmm. Oh, so true, so true. Thank you. Well, I
Yeah,
want to
of
let
course.
all the moms know, like she said, as Sabrina said, you're not alone. We love you and bringing any level of awareness to you so you can be more open to possibilities to move past, transform, and utilize the trauma to empower you to find yourself again. So thank you, Sabrina. I appreciate you and many blessings for sharing and sharing your light and your story.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate the time. And I just pray everyone gets what they need and can take it away and just start shifting and transforming their life.
Yes, and then I'll be putting your link, so if anyone resonates with you, then they can just
Yep.
connect with you with the links that you give me, and you guys
Perfect.
can get in touch with Sabrina. Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to Neutralize the Mama Trauma podcast. If you haven't already, please hit the like and subscribe button so you don't miss any new episodes. It would also mean the world to me if you're able to take a moment and rate and review my podcast on how it was helpful to you. Also, please connect with me on my social media platforms. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you in the next episode.